Today on Show Us Your Gear, we are talking about the difference between road shoes and trail shoes. Really, in the grand scheme of things, they're very, very similar, and there's a few key differences that set the two apart from each other. So, generally, the first thing that's really different between all of them is the outsoles. So, the outsole on a road shoe is generally fairly smooth. There's a little bit of texture usually, but for the most part, there's no big lug sticking out because you're running on a fairly smooth surface. On a trail shoe, you can see there's a lot more aggressive lugs. These ones are actually worn down a fair amount, but usually a lot of lugs, and they're kind of spaced apart with a bit of kind of smooth space in between that generally helps to shed out any mud or rocks shoes might pick up. And so you can kind of see the big difference between the two of them there. The other interesting thing, a lot of the more lightweight road shoes, such as these Hokas that I have, they're actually going away from using a more durable rubber on the bottom. And it's actually almost like a foam that they have on the bottom. Keeps the shoes super, super light, but if you were to run on anything other than pavement or treadmills, they tend to wear out pretty fast because you kind of take big chunks out of them on the ground. So the rubber on the trail shoes is generally nice and sticky and very, very durable. So that's the soles. Next up is going to be the material that the upper of the shoe is made out of. So trail shoes, they generally have a little bit tighter mesh, and they generally have a bit more structure to them. If you're going to be running through rocks and roots on the trails, you want to have a shoe that's going to be able to hold up to that. Road shoes, they generally use a lot lighter mesh because there's less wear and tear on the uppers. They go for more breathability and a little bit less durability. And then finally, the last difference between them is the stiffness of the sole. So a lot of road shoes, they tend to be fairly flexible and nice and stiff. So that works great when you're on the roads. You're running on a nice flat surface. There's not a lot of kind of obstacles in your way. Nice flexible shoes are awesome for that type of running. When you get out into trails, you want to have a shoe that's a little bit stiffer, so that if you step on a rock, you don't feel that rock poking up through the sole of your shoe. So a lot of shoes, they'll actually have a rock plate, so you can never see it, but they'll usually either tell you about it at the running store, or they'll say on the info sheet for the type of shoe that you have. And what that is basically a rock plate sits within the sole of the shoe. It's usually a little bit thicker plastic or something a little bit stiffer than what a road shoe would have. And essentially, it kind of acts as like a little bit of a shield. So if a rock tries to push through the sole of the shoe, it's going to hit that and the force gets distributed a little bit more and you're less likely to feel it on the sole of your foot. So that's kind of the three main differences between road shoes and trail shoes. In the grand scheme of things, they're very similar. There are still a lot of people out there that will still use a road shoe on the trails, and you can still use a trail shoe on the roads. You just need to keep in mind that if you're using a road shoe on the trails, it's going to wear out a little bit more because the rocks will kind of take some chunks out of it. And you need to keep in mind if you're using a trail shoe on the roads, because the lugs stick out so much more, they tend to get worn off pretty quickly by running on the smoother pavement surfaces. So durability isn't as great if you're using one on the other type of surface, but in the grand scheme of things, they still work great. It's a shoe on your foot, and all you need to do is go out and have some fun on your run.